Welcome, everybody. I'm Michelle Evans. I am the Grants and Communications Director at Illinois Prairie Community Foundation. And every year we hold a day for philanthropy. And to celebrate philanthropy this morning, we're holding a nonprofits workshop, which you guys are all part of, answering a question or dealing with a topic that nonprofits in our community find of interest. This year, our topic is resilience and innovation, and it seems to be spot on for these times right now, as we're all kind of finding ourselves pivoting and making changes in the way that we're doing business, and really nothing's been done as usual this year. But we're all finding new ways to do that, and that's exciting for all of us. So I just wanted to start with a couple of housekeeping items. We are going to ask that everybody keep themselves muted unless they are going to be speaking. That allows for less background noise. And then when it's time for our panelists to speak, they will be speaking. And you know, we'll do, sorry, we will have, so we have some people here with us to guide this along, and we have four panelists, and then our outstanding moderator, Beth Whisman. And after, what we're going to do is have panelists. Each panelist will speak for about 10 minutes about their encounters with change and resilience, what they've been going through with their agency, and each one will go, and then at the end of the panel discussions, then we will have a Q&A for about 20 minutes, and that's where you can open up your, turn on your mics if you want to ask questions, or you can always ask questions through the chat window, and then we'll be monitoring those questions as they go along. So if we see something that we would pop in for the Q&A, then we're going to split out for a little bit for some breakout rooms. We're just kind of randomly assigning them. And so the first breakout room will be on resilience, and you'll all get together and either get to hear from the panelist that was in your session, or you all can talk about different things. We'd really like to hear about what other people are doing in terms of resilience in the community. And then we'll come back together, have a little gather, a recap for that for about 10 minutes. Then we'll do another breakout and talk about innovation, come back together, wrap that innovation breakout room up, and we will all be on our way by 11:30. So I would like to introduce Beth Whisman, who is with Town of Normal and the Children's Discovery Museum. And I invite her to get it rolling.
Oh, thank you, Michelle. And I did really want to point out that the Illinois Prairie Community Foundation staff has done a great job in being resilient. So thank you for coordinating this. I wondered if we'd even be able to do this event. So it's really been great that you all have been able to get this together. And we're happy to be here. So let's get rolling. This usually begins with a panel discussion every single year after we've been doing our chatting and networking and commiserating. We commiserate every year as we have our breakfast. We talk about the struggles that we've been through. We talk about our funding challenges that have been happening, our clients that we've not been able to serve, or those that we are still working on seeking funding for. I mean, the challenges are always there. But this year, science, Mother Nature, whatever, has certainly thrown us a major monkey wrench. And so I think if we were all together in the same room, we would be commiserating behind masks and very concerned about our health. So it's great that we're doing it online. And so we'll be able to do that a little bit when we're in our panel discussions. But for now, we want to talk with our panelists who are representing several different areas in the region, in different areas of service and opportunities and nonprofits. So let's introduce them. We're going to start with Candace Summers with the McLean County Museum of History, Liz Vincent with the City of Pontiac, BJ Wilken, who you know from the Bloomington-Normal YMCA, and Phani Aytam with United Way of McLean County. These are familiar faces in our community, and they certainly are not alone in what they've been experiencing, which is, of course, why they were selected. Many of you have already had some interaction with them over the last few months, trying to stretch a little bit and show some of that resilience that we're going to talk about. But we do want to start with Candace. So Candace Summers is with McLean County Museum of History. They have had some interesting challenges. The rules about museums operating has gone up and down over the last few months. And of course, your biggest fundraising event and service to the local education community is your annual cemetery walk. And I'm not sure if you noticed, but a lot of live productions were canceled this year, and you found new ways to get this done. So if you would take a few moments to share with the audience opportunities that you had to innovate, things that you didn't have a choice in, and ways that you found solutions to still be able to bring this product to not only the school children that you serve, but also the general public.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me. So for museums, like Beth said, it's been a roller coaster. Our museum is still close to the public. So the new order, didn't change our plans at all. That was just issued recently, that goes into effect this Friday, tomorrow. But for a history museum that relies a lot on, hands-on engagement, having people come into our space and engage with the building and the exhibits, wow. I mean, for me personally, I always joke like, oh, I belong in a history museum because I'm not very tech savvy. So I've had to learn quite a bit in a short amount of time to kind of transition what we do to online platforms. And so, I mean, very quickly, the whole team came together and started like, what can we do? What can we put online? What can we keep? How can we keep ourselves in the spotlight, that people still know we're here, that we're still working hard behind the scenes? Because, almost everybody was, working at home except for a bare bones skeleton crew. And so we started looking at resources, like what can we put online? So we started digitizing publications. Hannah Johnson, our education program coordinator, came up with a really great basically museum at home activities, where they're activities that we do normally in person, but we transitioned so you could do them at home. One of the groups that we struggled with engagement are our older adults in senior care facilities that, you can't go in and they can't come out. And so the isolation for them, and they were screaming for engagement. So we tried to do online programs to share with them. Our former outreach education coordinator, Anthony Bowman, came up with a great reminiscence slideshow called McLean County Critters. And if you need to pick me up, watch this on our YouTube page, because it's lots of cute animals and like kittens and puppies. And I mean, it's great and historic. They're all historic images put to music. And so we tried to come up with some really great ways to keep engaging. Plus, of course, our library and archives was still inundated with research requests, because while you're sheltering at home, what else do you have to do but work on your genealogy or work on, looking for information about your old home? So those kinds of things were definitely still happening. And we were fortunate at the time that Greg Coos, our executive director at the time, he, applied for the Paycheck Protection Program, which helped keep our museum running. I know there was other fundraising efforts, but that's not my area of expertise. I'm sure other people can speak better to it than I can. But one of the biggest things that entered my mind as soon as March shelter in place hit was the cemetery lock. What in the heck are we going to do? So we were like, okay, so let's right off the get-go, we're just going to keep going. We're going to keep planning it. We're going to keep preparing for it, looking at research, trying to think who our characters are. But as we kept going along, we're like, okay, maybe this is going to be like a hybrid situation. Maybe we're going to have smaller groups, do some kind of video component. Yeah, no. As it got closer to our drop deadline to decide what we were going to do, which was May, we realized that even if conditions are perfect, people are still going to be hesitant to come in large groups. And as the governments learned more and the guidelines kept out there, it really was, large groups was not going to happen. Our groups on average, when you attend a cemetery walk, are 30 to 40 people. Even in the best of conditions, you can't socially distance like 40 people watching live theater in a cemetery. And school groups was a whole different story. Those groups can be 40 to 50 once you add all the chaperones in. So social distancing was definitely in our mind. We'd have to wear masks, you know, in the groups. And we all know what the weather at the cemetery can be. It can be hot, it can be cold. So if it's cold, hey, masks, keep our faces warm while we're standing out there in the frigid temperatures. But really and truly, the biggest thing for us was schools. Nobody had any idea whether or not it would be in person or not in the fall. Really good indicators were they were not going to be in person. And even if they weren't going to be allowed field trips because the CDC was saying don't allow field trips. And so 60% of our audience is students in grades 6 through 12 plus college. And if they can't come, that's a huge chunk missing from this event. So we had a Zoom call of like 15 people to make this decision. And we just made it. We made it to turn it totally online. That gave us enough time to really put together a polished professional event. I mean, still, it was like a whirlwind. I mean, I thought I put in a lot of work for a cemetery walk every year. This was insane. Like it was, wow, down to like hours before it was supposed to go live. We were putting like the finishing touches on captions and videos and really wanting to make this an experience. Because like so many have said, people were craving that engagement. They were craving live theater. I mean, I miss live theater so much. And this was also a way that we could support the arts. That was another big thing for us. You know, so many artists are out of work. This is a paid gig. It's always been a paid gig for our actors that participate every year. And so we really wanted to make that conscious effort to provide some kind of support for our artists who give so much time and talent to this event every year. And so we found a partner, Broadleaf Media, who has been doing a lot with lots of community groups lately and doing a fantastic job of it. And Scott helped us realize this kind of vision I had in my head, because I wanted to be able to capture some kind of essence of the cemetery walk to make it seem like you were actually in the cemetery, seeing it live, but then recognizing that you're not, you're watching it on a video screen. And so he was able to really capture some great footage that makes it look like you are kind of winding through the cemetery as you're exploring the monuments and listening to the monologues. It was really a learning experience for me because I don't know anything about video production. So I'm so glad we have a great community that has all these people in it to help, you know, historic organizations like ours, you know, who don't do a lot of video and things like that, realize these dreams. And it has been overwhelmingly positively received. Especially by our teachers. They are so grateful. And I've gotten many emails from teachers saying, thank you for helping make this happen and letting us have a field trip, letting us break up this monotony of just being in school at our desks, you know, however many feet apart, or kids who are remotely learning full time, that they can have this engagement together that links them together via online and in the classroom. And the kids have enjoyed it. Some of the kids who sign up on their own leave comments because we have a feedback form. And one kid's like, this was a language arts assignment, but astonishingly, I enjoyed this. So I love the honesty of kids. I really do. They're great. And we've been able to extend it. So as we know, teachers are still trying to maneuver around these changing conditions and you know, transition from online to in person, back to online or hybrid. And so it's been a struggle for them to be able to make sure that they can have time to explore it with their students because they want to. And so we've been happy to be able to continue extending it for both teachers and the general public, because tickets still are on sale through our website. So you definitely have time to view it. And I'll let you in on a little secret. We just decided yesterday we're going to extend it again to give our teachers even more time and the public more time. So it will be through January 1st. We'll be making an official announcement next week, but inside info, since we're all together. And I saw it in the chat box too. So yeah, so plenty of time to continue experiencing it and enjoying it. And for our teachers to experience it with their kids. And one big thing this has taught us for years, people have been saying, why can't you do a video of this? You know, I live too far away, or I have physical limitations that don't allow me to do it. Well, yes, we can do a video. Now, it's not going to be the same top-notch video that we had this year, but there will be some kind of video component in the future. That way it allows us to continue expanding who can experience our programs and make them available to everybody. So I don't know if that's my 10 minutes, but.
Yeah. Well, I do think that's a common theme, Candace, that we are going to see that some of the innovations that we are coming up with are going to be raising the bar and the expectations for the delivery of our services. And honestly, I mean, inside baseball, that's a little stressful, right? Because once we realize that we can offer these extra products, I don't know if you got a raise when COVID came in the door. But, you know, for nonprofits, I think it does create an interesting situation where we are going to be in some ways making ourselves work harder, and we've raised our own bar, and the public will come to expect certain things from us. So we've got to figure out how to implement that into our plan and make it so that you're not working the day before the event, still editing captions, right?
In my pajamas at 10 o'clock at night, mind you. And like I said yesterday, this was opening Pandora's box, you know. It was a box we didn't really want to open, but COVID forced it, and I'm glad it worked, and I'm glad we can hopefully continue to do something online for people to experience, no matter where they are and what their abilities are too.
Well, you can visit the website mchistory.org, and you can find out about Cemetery Walk, those digital files that and collections that Candace was talking about, and the critter video is on YouTube, right?
Yep. Okay. There's a link to YouTube on our page at the bottom. You just click on it. It takes us to all of our YouTube videos.
Great. And then just a shameless plug, the Town of Normal Cultural Arts Department, one of the innovations we had to come up with was Santa Station is an activity we always have on the plaza. Obviously, putting children on the lap of a senior citizen man was not going to be a good idea in COVID times. So we had to come up with a totally different interaction, something that would be passive but authentic and local. And who do we turn to? Of course, the McLean County Museum of History. And we partnered with them and the public to be able to share holiday traditions. You know, what are our winter traditions in McLean County? And we're going to put those in this big light projection in Uptown Circle. We're really excited about it. We're working with Illinois State University School of Dance. We are working with the McLean County Museum of History. We're working with the town and our cultural arts department to be able to make this happen. So if you haven't been to uptownnormal.com, please do, and you can submit your images and then see some of the beautiful vintage and historic images from the McLean County Museum of History, starting the weekend of Thanksgiving. So hopefully that'll give you something to do safe from your car or walking around by yourself in Uptown Normal. Let's move on to our next guest. Her name is Liz Vincent with the City of Pontiac. You heard Candace talking about, you know, some of the limitations and changes for schools and how they interact with cultural arts and theater as well as museums. But what about the municipal side of things? Liz, I know that you were able to come up with some different ways to bring the community together and still deliver some entertainment value during these lonely times. Why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what Pontiac did and how you've met some of those challenges when it came to those crowd restrictions and some of the specific limitations for outdoor venues?
Yeah, thank you. First off, so much for having me. Greg, Michelle, can you hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, great. And the Illinois Prairie Community Foundation. And I also really want to take this time to thank the audience, all the participants in this. I'm really excited to actually learn from everybody else in this. Livingston County. I know we're a bit away from a lot of you in Bloomington-Normal and McLean County, but I really appreciate this chance to be here. So my name is Liz Vincent. I work for the city of Pontiac. I started working for Pontiac in our tourism department. In the summer of 2013, I had very diverse job title. I worked with our museums, I worked with our tour groups, I worked with an artist in residence, but then in 2015, we opened up the Eagle Performing Arts and Conference Center. It's a small venue that is renovated movie theater, and we host dinner theaters there. We have concerts, private events, all different sorts of things. It's a really neat space. If you haven't been there, I invite you when we're back open to come see something there. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about the community development team that I work with and work on as part of my job now with the city of Pontiac. It's comprised of members of our tourism department and also our Parks and Recs department, along with our administration, our city administration. So that's a big piece of the puzzle. But Beth, when she asked me what I was going to speak on, I said, actually, I'm going to talk about The Show Must Go On. And the reason I wanted to talk about that is it's interesting that we talked about the cemetery walk just a minute ago. I do have a theater background. I volunteer with a local community theater. I spent 12 years on the board of directors of the community theater. I minored in theater in college, and I have just always, it's been a passion of mine. And that is the one thing that is drilled into your head. The show must go on, right? Anybody that's ever done anything with theater, like nothing stops the show. I have been in theaters where fire alarms have gone off and we have had to evacuate and came right back and started the show again. You know, one of the best stories I have about how true that thought process is back in the summer of 2015, I was actually in active treatment for breast cancer. And that really is just a minor part of the story because I was president also of Vermilion Players at the time. I was leaving treatment and got the phone call that our theater had flooded out and we were opening our children's show that night. Our children's show has well over 100 children in it. So you can only imagine how big of a production that is. And by the time I got back to Pontiac from Bloomington in my treatment, it had already been figured out. We were moving to the high school, and by 4 o'clock that afternoon, the whole entire set, all of the tech pieces, all of those pieces were in place at a different venue. And the flood just went on through our park auditorium. So that really showed me how you have to rely on your community. And I think that that's important. You know, you can't always do it yourself. You always have to look to other people and really depend on them. And that was a huge lesson for me. So anyway, on to more about my, my work background and why I'm here today. So back in 2019, we started our community development team, and we set some goals forth for ourselves. We wanted to increase communication within our community. We wanted to engage our citizens more, and we also wanted to start utilizing our underdeveloped assets. So the band shell that sits, and it's a large, beautiful band shell that was built about 4 or 5 years ago. We had it for our community band, our municipal band, and we wanted to look at different ways to use it to engage different citizens that may not, you know, may want something different, some sort of different entertainment. And so we attempted in summer of 2018, we tried our first concert with a band called June's Got the Cash. It was a June and Johnny Cash tribute band, and they were fantastic, and it was incredibly well received. So from that, the next summer, 2019, our community development team worked on, and I headed up the project called Rockin' at the River. It was a concert series that we curated. There were 5 different concerts. We had an opening local act play for an hour beforehand, and then we had a more larger regional type act play after that. These concerts were all free, open to the public. Some of them even had like activity components. One time we had a band that was kind of focused on children's music. So we had balloon animals and face painting and all that stuff, and it was completely free. We were able to do that through our community development fund, and then we offset it with vendors and sponsors, you know, or not sponsors, I'm sorry, vendors and donations from the public. But we knew it was such a big success that we needed to take it to the next level. So I started planning right away. And we had 11 concerts booked for this past summer. And we were really excited. We developed a sponsorship program, and we applied for a grant, which is what I worked with Michelle on. And we were very grateful to be able to receive a grant from the Illinois Prairie Foundation, Community Foundation, excuse me. And then COVID hit. And I have to tell you, when COVID hit, I knew it was serious when I heard Broadway went dark. You know, because like I said, show must go on. So, you know, okay, MBA is closed. Okay, I don't know. Broadway's dark. This is serious. So we had to actually cancel our spring dinner theater at the Eagle. But we still thought maybe, right? Maybe something's going to happen. Maybe this will all slow down. So we held out hope. And finally, I believe it was in May, we made the call that we weren't going to be able to do the concerts. And that was a huge blow to everybody because, you know, I know that musicians, actors, creatives, everyone, they're struggling, technicians. There's not a lot of work out there for them. And it was heartbreaking to make those calls and say, can we move you to next summer? I'm really sorry. Well, then I saw a post on Facebook, Buffalo Grove Park District. They did a concert that was a socially distanced concert. I'm sure by now a lot of you have seen where those have happened, but we were able to hold a concert on August 22nd. It was incredibly well attended. We did quarantine circles. So there were circles that were 14 foot in diameter. Only 10 people could be in that circle, and you needed to be with people that you were comfortable with. So, you know, your household, maybe close friends that you knew, you know, what they were doing and you felt safe being with them. And once you were in the circle, you didn't have to have your mask. You could just enjoy yourself. We got rid of the vendors so that we didn't have areas of congregation, and we required masks if you were not outside your circle. And I know one of the things we talked about was how would that be received? And I have to say, I was really nervous about how that would be received. Would people follow the rules? Would people want to come? Would they feel safe? You know, I mean, these were all valid questions. And like I said, it was really well attended. We had well over 400 people there. Everyone was safe, at a distance, followed the rules, and had fun, which is the biggest part. Because like it was said earlier, people are craving that, right? People are craving that, that cultural experience. So we were grateful to be able to do that. I think I'm close to being out of time here, but yeah, we'll chat more on that. Thank you.
Wonderful. You know, Liz, the impact financially of COVID-19 on cultural arts nationwide in the United States so far, we've hit about 14 billion with a B. $14 billion economic hit. You're talking jobs, you're talking tourism, that's real tax dollars going into our coffers. So, you know, when we look at the impact of this pandemic on our society, you know, we know it's affecting small businesses. We know it's affecting healthcare. We know it's affecting homes and schools, life and death stuff. But when your career, when your job, when the very thing that makes you breathe is cultural arts, theater, music. $14 billion is a very real hit. So I will be very interested to see how much Congress is going to be looking at relief funding that is specifically geared towards that sector of the economy, because it has not been as robust as understandably I think some of the other fields have been right out of the gate. But as this continues to impact, you mentioned Broadway, 97,000 people are out of work right now for one city, right? So imagine that in all of our communities. So thank you for the work that you've been doing. And we look forward again to learning a little bit more about how these cultural arts opportunities are going to bring communities together as we figure out how to have audiences, how to have those live stage productions. We know it might not really happen until 2021, 2022. I mean, we really know that this is a long range problem that we are dealing with in the realities of getting people back together in these large groups. So let's move on to the other side of some of these challenges. We've been talking a lot about how education has been a big part of the struggles and how cultural arts institutions reach students, but also, well, not having school, not having a physical space, not having the ability to bring together our people, our resources, all the things we pay for and we believe in. And let's be honest, we preach this as an industry, nonprofits, you know, education is everything. And so when all of a sudden the very infrastructure of how we deliver those resources disappears or is heavily impacted, what do we do? Well, the United Way of McLean County has been working through not only its staff, but an amazing network of volunteers that I have been floored by. They have really come together and really brought different talents, different resources together to be able to do some old school problem solving. And Phani Aytam is with us today. I've seen him in action with the education group that's been working with different schools and informal educators, as well as retired educators under a pretty robust panel and committee over the last 6 or 7 months. So Phani, if you would take a few moments to share with our audience, you know, what are some of the things that you have seen from the volunteer side of things and helping coordinate a little bit of this resilience and innovation in McLean County?
Thank you, Beth. Happy to share some perspectives. They didn't get the star speakers that they were looking for in David Taylor or Deanna Fracci or Cat Woods, so they asked me to join in. So thank you for entertaining me today. So what I want to share with you is some perspectives about our learnings in the last few months. The analogy that I usually draw when I talk to people about our work is just imagine being a boat in real thunderstorms or what have you. Just imagine being that ship or a boat. And we had these 100-foot waves coming our way, something that could rock you and topple you or what have you. Back in March, even before the pandemic really became real, on March 1st, the first week of March, United Way of McLean County made a decision that we were going to take a good chunk of our money, close to about $100,000, and use it towards the pandemic. Nothing was discussed, and we didn't know any impact of the pandemic back then. The notion that we had was something didn't feel right. We needed to do something about it. And we started asking the question, what can we do to really address this? So we saw one large wave coming our way, and that wave was all about food. People needed food, and there was real scarcity of food. There were other waves that we could see, but they were out in the distance. The waves were more about housing. People need a place to live. We have some issues around education that Beth was talking about, and that was truly important. And the last thing that we saw was around employment. And that's a wave that's still lurking out there. It really hasn't hit us strong yet because of some of the unemployment benefits and other things that you've been hearing about. Notice, I didn't talk about health yet. That's the lurking biggest wave that's out there. And we know that's out there, and yet we haven't really addressed that head on because that needs to be addressed more on a federal level. It's almost like, you know, you can fix a hole in one side of the boat, but if it's leaking from the other end, you still are going to go down. So that needs to be addressed at a national and a world level too. So with that perspective in mind, the first thing that we were looking at was we needed to think about what do we want to do. And the biggest question that came up with the executive committee was, if it's not now, then when? If it's not us, then who? So we needed to figure out, how do we as an organization think about, how does United Way add value to the community? It's about the community. It's not about United Way. It's about the people that we serve. It's not the people who are really leading the work. So we took that perspective and we started asking the question, what role do we want to play? How do we want to do this? And there were 3 guiding principles that really came out of that work, which informed our thinking. First thing is collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. We want to work behind the scenes. It's the nonprofits and the organizations that are really doing the work. How do we enable them to be successful? So our friends from Boys and Girls Club were doing amazing work with feeding Blono kids. We started working with them to say, you know, you've done a phenomenal job to get that out there. You are searching for funding. How do we work with you? Before you know, this was literally over a weekend, calling Tara Ingham, local restaurants and others in town to say, how do we start serving about 1,000 meals a week? 2-pronged benefit from it. We buy 1,000 meals from local restaurants. There were 8,000 restaurant employees that were going to be impacted by the pandemic. You buy produce from the restaurants, you're getting them cash flows, they get people employed. More often than not, it's the same employees that you're feeding on the back end too. It's very ironic, but that's the truth. We did that over a weekend. Then we started calling, I would say we probably called about 200 people in less than 48 hours. Churches, nonprofits, I guess we're recording, but I'll say it anyways. Felt like a drug dealer. You want some of this? Yeah, let me get you hooked up, right? So how do we get them to say, can you do 100 meals? Can you do 200 meals? So on and so forth. The churches, restaurants, many organizations stepped up. Before you know, within a month, we went from serving 1,000 meals a week to almost 10,000 meals a week. We served over 100,000 meals during this time frame, and I'm just talking about the first wave here. The second thing that we wanted to get to was, how do we become more nimble? We want to learn. Here's the important thing. We want to unlearn, and we want to relearn. All of that needs to happen. It needs to happen quickly. So we started working with a lot of non-leaders. We had 4 coalitions that formed. There's an advisory task force that's led by Deanna Frauci that focused primarily on food when we got going. We had a housing coalition work that really got going. That also happened within a week. Now it's being led by Adrian Barr, who's on the call, and Lauren Gibson. Then we had a childcare and youth programming coalition that had 20 plus people. Beth Whisman and others are on that. The coalition work, it was more about what do we need to do to help our young people. And Judge John Freeze, as well as Dale Avery, headed that up. And the last one was more about workforce, and we started collaborating with EDC and the chamber to make that happen because they were the right people to do it. The last thing that we, from a guiding principle, was be bold. Don't be bashful about doing what's the right thing. Have the tough conversations. Being bold required us to do 3 things. Try something, learn from it, figure out how to scale. It's not going to be a year or 2-year process. We're talking about days and weeks. And David Taylor and the United Way staff did a phenomenal job to make that happen. But there are 60 plus nonprofits that collaborated across all of this work and an enormous number of volunteers. Here's the big thing, being bold. Asking the Deanna Fraucis and the John Freezes to say, are you willing to burn your social equity to make this happen? Right? That's the tough question. They are putting their reputation on the line to bring organizations and players to the table to say, are you willing to put your reputation to bring players together? And that's what they did. It is a difficult thing to do in this community. We do well to collaborate, but are you going to put your reputation on the line to collaborate? And that's what these amazing people like the Deanna Fraucis, John Freezes of the world did. There are organizations that sit and wait for things to come to them. This wasn't that time. It's our time to really go out there and serve first and lead next. So those guiding principles were very important for us as we work through this, and defining and redefining our role every single week. The board of directors at United Way, which is what I serve on, became that augmented force for United Way. United Way has only about 3.5 staff people. We couldn't do this with just the staff. And United Way and its own volunteers cannot do this. Why would an Adrian Barr come out and help out with Housing Coalition? Because he believes that's the right thing to do. Why would a John Fries who's retired to really come out of retirement to say, Phani, I'm willing to spend 20 hours a week to really make this happen. Hey, by the way, I feel like I'm getting rejected all the time. As a judge, I don't feel like I should get rejected when I ask things that should get done. I'm just kidding. But that's what they were doing. They were putting their social equity on the line to really make that happen. And that was important for us to do. We have had a lot of support. The Illinois COVID Response Fund that was created by Governor Pritzker saw early as to what we were doing. They've given us 2 major grants. We were the first downstate organization outside of United Way to get funding. By the way, to make all of this happen, you need money. So we had to build a coalition with local sponsors, employers, donors, and we did that through talking to the large CEOs in the organization to think about, hey, this is what we're doing. Are you willing to collaborate and help? At the end of the day, it's all about collaboration. It is about value add, and it's about trying something. And trust me, we've made a fair share of mistakes. And if there's any fault, that's mine, no one else's. I've stuck my foot in my mouth a number of times, but then again, we've learned something from it. And I think the outcomes have been helpful, but I think we're not there yet. I think those 100-foot waves are still lurking out there. The question is, are we thinking in a very siloed and myopic manner to say, how do I survive? How does my organization survive? Or are we looking sideways to say, at the end of the day, who are we trying to serve? How do they get best served? And how do I look sideways to say, who else can I work with to do that the best way possible? I think that's been our journey, Beth. And I know I probably have taken a bit more time than I should, but it gives you more of a philosophical view on our work. And there's several of you who have been a part of that work, creating that impact in the community. So I'll just pause there and see, Beth, if you want to clean me up or ask any questions.
I do actually, because, with your perspective as a board member, a volunteer, I think that many of our nonprofits, we have boards, and depending on what time of year it is or what project is at hand, our level of engagement with our board isn't always at the highest level. So it's been pretty exciting to see what the coalitions have been willing to do. You mentioned spending your social collateral to get people to do things. We're not talking about getting people to put an invitation list together or to be the dinner coordinator, although those things are very important during regular non-COVID times. You're talking about people bringing people together who don't agree on the very fundamentals of what's happening out there, the science behind what is being recommended, the differences, the moving target constantly of how schools are delivering services and are and aren't allowed to gather. When people are fighting about those very basic things, and you have volunteers who are using a judge as a really great way, to bring people together. I've witnessed him have to really bring people to the middle to talk about, okay, well, you don't agree on this, but we still have to deliver these services, and asking and challenging each organization that's represented to not be myopic, right? Like you said, to not think about just how you're going to do it, but how we might be able to help each other out. And I would like to say that all of those conversations are friendly and happy, but we know better. We're passionate about what we do, right? And we don't want any of our people left behind. So we're fighting. And in some ways, that's the best thing we can be doing right now, because it's invigorating, it reminds us what's important. And I have to say, having volunteers like you, Phani, and Adrian, and all the others who are part of these coalitions, I think it makes our nonprofit world feel better about the fact that you care, that you're willing to work this hard, and that you see that the only way to get it done is to work like this.
I agree, but just to add 30 seconds to it, right? The part of the reason why the work is a bit difficult is a lot of our nonprofit partners are in a self-preservation mode. When you are sinking and you can't really get your head above the water and you're asking, hey, by the way, help the other person out, it's difficult, right? I mean, let's just own that, right? If you are in a place where you're in a good place, it's easy for you to look sideways to say, how can I help? When you're not able to feed yourself, you're not breathing yourself, it's difficult. So that's where I think you need that perspective to step outside of what you're doing to say, who am I serving? Are they being served the best way possible? And who do I collaborate with to make that happen? So I just wanted to build on your thought. Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, thank you, Phani. And let's not forget that every one of the people working on these coalitions are dealing with their own stuff. You know, their kids are at home, they're doing remote learning. I mean, none of this stuff is, as you said, set up to be comfortable or easy. It's definitely hard work, but it is making a difference. And, you know, 10,000 meals a week, that's mind-boggling. And yet you've been able to achieve it, and we know it's not going to end anytime soon. So thank you, Phani, and for all of you on this call who I know are collaborating and working behind the scenes with the United Way on some of these issues. You know, the work's not done yet, so keep it up, stay committed, and take care of yourself. But, you know, understand that we've not seen times like this, and it is a real reflection of who we are as a community to see this type of collaboration happening. Especially with the level of enthusiasm that it's happening with, even when we're fighting about how to do it. So you mentioned nonprofits. You know, we are just keeping our head above water in some cases. In the Children's Discovery Museum, you know, to be quite honest, we've been closed for 250 days. That's a major revenue stream for us, right? But we have funding sources that have asked us to step in and try to help with some of our youth education programs. So, you know, one of the things that we did was we started building our free STEAM kits. And when you don't have many volunteers because of the pandemic and you have 0 part-time staff, you know, all of a sudden your full-time staff is completely changing what they do day to day. And we're building STEAM kits for kids. Thank goodness we had funding to help us do that. But that's just a very tiny example of what Phani was talking about, and focusing on just changing, you know, how we are. I'll just say this way, it gave us a reason not to complain to ourselves. You know, we had real work to do, and though we could not educate children in person the way we wanted to, and our online resources were hopefully good, but, you know, different, being able to help other organizations at the same time, it did something positive to focus on. And so you look at nonprofits who also like building stuff, right? We built a new exhibit during the COVID sheltered home. Started the process because we had earmarked funds. We knew when we reopened, we would need to have this done. So we look at BJ Wilken at the YMCA in Bloomington-Normal. They have a capital campaign going on. They're changing physically what they're doing and where they are. And what happens, some of the biggest asks on the table. When you have some of the biggest collaboration within 100 years, and it happens to fall during this time. BJ is with us this morning to talk a little bit about how the YMCA is changing. And really, I'm very curious how you are moving forward with some of these major projects, knowing that the horizon keeps changing. Is BJ with us? I saw him earlier.
Yeah, there, Beth, you were kind of breaking up a little bit there, so I was, you were a little delayed, but thank you for having me. And Beth, I've got to criticize you a little bit. So, you know, I have to go last and I have to follow the enthusiasm of Candace, the passion of Liz, and an incredible thought leader of Phani. I mean, how do I follow that, right? So great job to everybody. And it's great to see so many good faces out there that I haven't seen in such a long time. I can't wait when we can get together and do this next year. And I know that brighter days are ahead. So, yeah, so just a little bit about, you know, the question around how were we able to kind of pull this off in a pandemic? And the question is, I have no clue. I mean, I really don't know. The fact of the matter is that I think that, you know, as many of you on the call recognize, the YMCA for many, many years, even preceding me, and I've been going on 12 years at this Y, has, you know, attempted to start, stop, and building a new facility. And we have built momentum prior to the pandemic, but I'll tell you what the pandemic allowed us the opportunity to do. You know, one of the most difficult things as we moved into a capital campaign is that you know, many of you know the success of large capital campaigns really are the foundation of about 10 to 15 donors. We have to be realistic about that. And right now, about 90% of any goal of any capital campaign is coming from about 10% of the donors. And what the pandemic allowed us to do is really what did everybody have on their time, or at least, you know, at their disposal when the pandemic hit? It was really time. And so it allowed us the opportunity to really connect deeper with some of our larger donors. And they began asking those questions, you know, how do we go from here? And ultimately, you know, I saw Tony Morstetter make a comment on the chat box about how grateful we are for this community and the donors who have stepped up, and everybody who has come together in the community. And I would have to agree with that. I will tell you that the largest donors and some of our wealthiest people in this community who have been extraordinarily blessed are continuing to see the needs in the community, and they are stepping up. And I believe that we were just incredibly blessed with individuals stepping up to see, you know, this opportunity and this need, and they seize the moment. So, you know, right now, we did break ground. You know, our board of directors and our foundation board of trustees had multiple meetings around the fact of, do we break ground now or do we wait? And so we had 3 different meetings on weighing the pros and cons about how we go about doing that. We talked to many people and experts outside of the community. We tried to gather as much data as we could around, you know, what's the science telling us in terms of when we're going to come out of this? What's our construction time frame? When do we plan on opening? All of those things we took into consideration around the needs on, you know, when should we do this? And I think the consensus around the table was there is no better time like the present. In other words, to say that the YMCA in Bloomington-Normal is the second oldest YMCA in the state of Illinois outside of Chicago. We have been in this community for over 163 years. And so we have endured many, many challenges, as you can imagine, in those years. And so we really saw this as an opportunity to look ahead 50 years so that we can look back and say, yeah, we broke ground in a pandemic and we're making a stake in an investment in this community because we believe in Bloomington-Normal and McLean County. That was really the enthusiasm behind that. And so we are partnering with Easter Seals. Easter Seals is going to be a tenant, and they will lease 7,000 square feet out of our facility. The whole goal and vision for this was to build and construct a welcoming, inclusive, and inviting environment that really fostered youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. So I'm really enthused and excited by this facility, particularly around just the social responsibility component of this. And let me give you an example about that. You know, the YMCA is for youth development, healthy living, and social responsibility. We say that, but are we really when we have a facility that doesn't have an elevator, that is not ADA compliant, that is not inclusive of those with disabilities? And so we've made a conscious decision to utilize what's called universal design in this new facility. And so universal design, and I had to be educated by this, is really taking the Americans with Disabilities Act and putting it on steroids. So if a doorway needs to be 32 inches, we're going 36 inches. If a hallway needs to be 6 feet, we're going 9 feet. All of the aspects of this facility will be very, very inclusive, and we're really excited by that. So more operationally, I can talk and speak to, you know, how COVID and the pandemic has hit us and how we've been able to adapt. You know, on top of moving forward with closing out a capital campaign and breaking ground on a new facility, you know, operationally, we've been extraordinarily blessed to seize an opportunity to really work with those families who really had no choice in the beginning but to go to work. So when you think about our first responders, our healthcare workers, we provided emergency childcare services for those individuals, as well as many other nonprofits in the community. And that has morphed into then partnering with Unit 5 and District 87 on remote learning. So we started what we, you know, I would characterize it as kind of a quasi mini charter school. It's a temporary charter school that we had to cap at 150 kids. We had a waiting list of over 300. And so we partnered with Unit 5 and District 87 in 7 different sites. So as the schools shut down, we were able to socially, or I shouldn't say social, we don't like to use the term socially distant. We physically distant because we like to stay socially connected. But we physically distanced under this CDC guidelines and the Restore Illinois plan. And I'm very, very proud of our team and our staff in being able to do that. Today, as we speak, we've got about 46 kids in our building, scattered throughout. So we've taken over the gymnasium, we've taken over the multi-purpose rooms and spaces, and kids, as we speak, are in front of their computers with their headphones on, and we're helping those kids. And what I'm really proud of is that these are some families and kids that, again, as I stated, have no other choice but to go to work. They just really, you know, their shift work. They don't have much flex time, and so it's really, we've really been able to connect and develop deep relationships with these families. So yeah, I think you know, looking at the clock here, it's about 10 o'clock, Beth, and so I think we're moving into Q&A.
BJ, you have a few things on your plate.
Just a couple.
Well, thank you to our panelists for sharing. This has been very enlightening, but of course, this is really just the tip of the iceberg and just gives us a sense of some of the many challenges our community has been facing, but also meeting the challenges for, or at least beginning to meet those challenges. But what about the rest of us? You know, this is certainly not something that we're doing alone as nonprofits. Even as a community, we have state and federal resources we can lean on or maybe be inspired by. Let's talk a little bit about that with some questions and answers. Our panelists are available to answer questions if you want to specifically address anything that they've said, or if you have something happening in your nonprofit or within your board that you think we might be able to help with. So if you want to share questions in the chat, you can do that there. Or if you'd just like to hit your mute button and talk a little bit, feel free. I could start with a good question. What would you say was the thing, and it goes to any of our panelists, what would you say was the thing that maybe got you the most excited? You know, it's hard to say that, you know, when you're in a crisis that you can be excited. But the truth is, you know, this is really what we are here for, right? Nonprofits in particular, human services, education, we're here for the crisis. And so when things hit that are making us think differently and work differently and collaborate more, sometimes you do get excited because here is this group you've not worked with before, or here is this solution you came up with that actually is working and you're seeing it happen in real time. Do you have any examples like that where you just felt like, yeah, that was a win today? We've had some hard blows in the last few months, but that was a win. Candace, I see your hand is up.
So there's a couple things. So before the pandemic hit, we were trying to figure out, like, how are we still going to stay open and completely remodel our bathrooms and redo our historic lighting that we got a grant for, and then it was taken away, and then we got it again. So silver lining, that's what I've been saying this whole time. Silver lining is we decided to keep the museum closed, and then we can just do all this construction and not have to worry about bathrooms and not have to worry about visitors or dust or anything else. So that's been awesome. Really, really awesome. Another thing that excited me is all the resources that we've digitized. And there's more resources that are being digitized, but I'm going to keep you all in suspense. There's like a couple that I'm super excited about because there's only like a couple copies of them that exist. So it's been something that the public has been wanting us to do. But, you know, when you're trying to do programs, you're trying to do all your normal things and events, that kind of is a low priority. But in a pandemic, when you can't do all those things, you're like, okay, what can we get out there that people want to read, people want to use for research? And so digitizing a lot of these older publications that there aren't that many copies, that are a really great local history and national history resource too, has been super, super exciting. And they're all on our website that you can click on anytime to access them. So those have been a couple highlights, if there are highlights in this crazy time.
Phani, did you have something to add?
Yep, I'll share a couple, Beth. I think at the end of the day, when you hear the stories from those you serve, I think that's really gratifying. So there was a mother of 3 individuals who lost her job in the pandemic, and Mike Jones and the Western Avenue Community Center, they started serving meals along with Eastview Church. This mother came in one day and she said, you know, these meals have really kept my family together. And she was extremely emotional about it. And when you see that impact from one family, again, you're serving 10,000 meals, right? Or maybe if you're impacting 100 such families, that's real impact, right? I think that those stories is what feed the volunteers. Right? It feeds your soul. It gets you going. It helps you wake up the next day and do it all over again. And more importantly, a month or two in, Beth, you start getting calls from people that you haven't heard before saying, how can I help you? How can I volunteer? You know, I think it's kind of a validation that what the work that you're doing is having an impact. And when you do the right thing and share with the rest of the community what you're doing, not because of your accomplishments, but sharing that space to serve together, there are many in this community that'll step in and step up. And I think that those two things, right? Going shoulder to shoulder with someone to serve and seeing the impact of the people that you serve from their standpoint, I think that's the gratifying part of about this work.
I would definitely agree with that. And, you know, and whether you're feeding people, connecting people, or even entertaining people, you know, when you hear that feedback, I think you don't always get the feedback during regular times. People, I don't want to say to take it for granted, but there is an assumption that there will be something there. And when you've struggled to find those basic needs and someone's there for you, even if you're the one doing the volunteering and you're delivering it and you need that community partner to be there for you, it does make you have a deeper appreciation for this community and our willingness to step in and help each other out. What about some of the things that you feel like we haven't been able to accomplish, or maybe are still in the works, and that we hopefully will see some outcomes in the next few months? I know cultural arts in particular, until we can have large gatherings, some things are just not going to be able to happen. But what about some of that infrastructure, serving our kids, BJ, getting the schools served, and field trips one day eventually returning? Those almost seem like icing on the cake, but that is very much a core part of what museums do, right? What are some of the things that we are still working on?
Well, I think the natural is essentially just that human connectedness. All of us, right, are in the human service industry. And what's the common theme amongst all of us is that we bring humans together. And so in our emergency action plan, there is nothing in our emergency action plan that calls for how do we deal with a pandemic. I just think that heartfelt human connection of being able to, come together and see each other. And, I often tell people that there are, besides food, clothing, and shelter, the number one need amongst human beings is acceptance and belonging. If you think about it, each one of us has an ego that has to be fed, that acceptance and that belongingness. And so, we're banking on in the YMCA that people coming back together people are going to yearn for that. And so keep that in mind as you move forward. Let that be your guiding light and your principles as you're planning for the future. When you're planning for whether it's a theater or kids or whatever that may be, people are going to want to gather again and get back together. So that should bring us all hope.
Thanks, BJ. That actually made me feel better. I think you're right. And by the way, just a thought, obviously staff morale, volunteer morale, family morale, all of that is at stake here. We are all feeling it, and it's okay to need those things that BJ talked about. We need to feel good about what we're doing. We need to feel accepted and loved and appreciated. And so I hope that all of us as nonprofit workers and volunteers and directors are taking some time to make sure our staff and our volunteers are feeling that way from us. And I'm sure that we are, but it's easy to get in that trench and forget that we need to be doing those things. So BJ, I appreciate you bringing that up. Matt Drat just said he had a question. So Matt, would you like to ask your question of the panel?
I would, thank you. And really to anybody else here. And I think BJ and Phani talked a little bit about this. There's a reasonable amount of risk taking that we have all had to do with really, in some respects, very little understanding of what the outcome might be. And yet we all, I think, BJ talks about asking the question about whether we move forward or whether we wait. And I know that many of us, as we look at just the near-term future, are confronted with, I think, a lot of people who, because of their own anxieties, really want to wait. And yet we just can't. We can't wait anymore. So I'm just curious as to how panelists or others on the call have handled certainly the questions from people who want to wait, who want to see before they make a decision, and then balance that with some reasonable risk taking.
I think I'll just start quickly as a panelist here. I think the first thing you have to look at are the guidelines that we know. We know that we don't have all of the answers. We know that we won't know all of the answers maybe for a decade. So what we can do is we can control the things we can control, and we can use the information that we have at our fingertips. And we have guidelines. We have health experts globally who are telling us what at this point is acceptable and is not. And when that needle moves, we have to pay attention to it. And so, yes, there are definitely things that we need to move forward to do. And we use those guidelines for crowd numbers and protocols to try to make that safer. But when there's a disagreement, about how to do it or what is safest, Matt, that is a big challenge. And especially in the cultural arts world, where it's not life and death, but it is quality of life, and it is our mission. How do you do things when you don't agree about whether we even should be doing them? And I think that's a really good question. So for us, we use those guidelines as starting points, and then we hash it out, and we look for every modification we can make. And then we see where those numbers are going. And if you have to cancel, you have to cancel. That's our perspective. BJ, Phani, Candace, Liz, any thoughts on, you know, when maybe you have staff who are paralyzed in a sense from that concern? You know, children's museums early on were saying a lot of things like, you know, we won't reopen until there's a vaccine in widespread use. How long is that going to be? So that's too long for most children's museums, for most organizations, to not operate. So what do you do if that's someone's standard of when we start acting again? How do you motivate? How do you get moving?
So I can piggyback on that a little bit. I had a yoga instructor not too long ago that used this phrase, and it's kind of stuck with me. We are all in the same storm. We're just riding it out in different boats. So it's a good thing to keep in mind that, you know, everybody is in this swirl, but the tools that they have to get through are different. So, you know, it's hard when you hear somebody talking about, you know, 10,000 meals and then I'm talking about concerts, you know, like you said, but it is that quality of life. So, you know, we actually, Pontiac has a lot of very strong traditions around the holiday season. Our downtown, if anyone has ever been here, is very picturesque. And that is also part of what we do with our community development team. So, you know, there's been this longstanding tradition of the light up parade and Santa's house being downtown and generations of people bringing their children to sit on Santa's lap. And that's just not going to happen this year. So how do we fix that, right? So we have moved our light up parade into a static drive-through in one of our parks that is going to be a perfect, beautiful setting for it. It'll be completely safe, and there should be no issues with it at all. And then also we've created a snow globe for Santa and Mrs. Claus. So they will not be able, you know, the kids will be able to go and stand and take pictures with Santa, but they won't actually get to sit on Santa's lap. But it gives them that interaction and that sense of normalcy in some way. So I think just thinking outside the box, like, what can we do? Okay, maybe this is how we did it before. How can we move it into what we're currently going through?
Gail Dobbins in our audience has a question or maybe a story to share. Of course, we find our strengths in challenging times, but we also find our weaknesses, the things that maybe we're not doing so well. Gail, do you have a story to share?
Well, I don't know if it's a story, but I think it's something that we all discovered in the pandemic. I think we all found this to be more of a problem than we thought it was. It's the age of volunteerism. The volunteers at Heartland are most all over age 60. And that was just fine. We were just floating along, lots of ushers, lots of people helping with costumes, things like that. But when we started looking at what can we do in our space and preparing our disaster preparedness document, it became obvious that our volunteers were going to be most at risk. And I think the polls in the recent voting places, I think they ran into that problem that most of their volunteers were older. So I think it's a weakness that we found at Heartland and that we need to work on. And we wouldn't have really, it just smacked us in the face. I don't think we would have really done anything about that until the pandemic showed itself to us.
Yeah, I think you're right, Gail. I think a lot of organizations have experienced that their most dedicated volunteers, some board members, some donors, they're the most at risk. So yeah, how do you keep working when they can't work?
One solution.
We'll wrap it up. Oh, sorry, Candace, but I was going to go to Phani next and actually have him wrap up. Did you have something quick to add about, I know the History Museum has quite a few senior volunteers.
Yeah, it's not a perfect solution, but we have been delivering work home to our very eager volunteers who have wanted to continue and engage. So I know the library's been doing lots of drops with volunteers. We're working on a big Christmas card project to send to the senior living facilities. So yeah, they're eager for stuff to do. So if you have the ability to deliver work, they will definitely do it and be hungry for more.
Cool. Well, that Christmas card idea might be a collaboration. So let's talk after the meeting. Thank you. That's really amazing. Because you know what? That's something to think about. Taking care of our volunteers, even though they're used to taking care of us and taking care of our constituents, we owe them a little bit. And so to be able to deliver those opportunities, that's pretty awesome. So we need to, go ahead, Gail.
Just really quickly, a silver lining for Heartland during this time was getting our archives to the Museum of History, something we never had time to do. And so we really focused on it, and we were so excited in October to take all of our collection to the Museum of History.
Shout out to Heartland Theater and the McLean County Museum of History. So we need to wrap up soon because we are going to go into our breakout sessions, but I thought we would turn one last time to Phani Aytam with United Way of McLean County as we are kind of wrapping up our thoughts in what we learned, what we're still learning, and what we're maybe even still afraid of as we're moving forward with the pandemic.
Yeah, thanks, Beth. So I was going to respond to Matt's question, and it's a bit of a self-reflection for us. Some of us as organizational leaders or individuals who are involved with nonprofits, we all have always been in control of what we wanted to do. I think the pandemic showed us how much we are in control and how much we don't really have control over. Something that we had to learn within United Way and the work we were doing is, the phrase that I'm going to use is freedom in the frame. So, asking your board of directors to say, what is the frame within which you want us to play in? Like, what's the amount of risk that we can take? So Matt, maybe in response to your question though, you don't want to go off and do something that your board doesn't agree with. So how do you have a strategic conversation about what is the freedom that I, as my organizational leader, have freedom in the frame? Define that frame for me. And again, I'll put this delicately. Please get out of my way. Just let me do my job, right? So I think that's important for us to define that frame. Now, here's a challenge for you as leaders. Are you then in turn defining a frame for the employees that you work with? Or are you being directive and prescriptive to them to say, this is the way it needs to be done. This is the only thing that you do. Goes back to Liz's comment about how do you open up the box for some creativity to say, here is the outcome that we're trying to achieve. We want to raise funds. Just because this is the way we have raised funds in person is not the only way to get there. So I think it is a very important strategic conversation. And I know that a lot of us don't really have our head above the water, barely above the water. I think it's an important conversation I've had with a number of boards out there within the community to start defining this. What is the frame that you're giving to your executive director? And in turn, for those executive directors to be coached about what is the frame that you're giving to your employees to work with. Define outcomes, not the process. Define what needs to be accomplished, not how it needs to be accomplished. It goes to volunteers and what have you. It's a tough thing. We've all been through our default about the way we work or the way we lead. It's ingrained in us. It's going to take some unlearning for us to say, you know what? I can let go of that. I can let go of that control because the organizational's well-being is more important than the way I do it. So Beth, I took an extra minute there, so hope that's helpful.
I think that is fantastic advice, Phani. We really appreciate that. And I would add also, and don't be afraid to hear honest feedback from your crew, whether it's your volunteers, your staff, your peers. Sometimes you got to give them that space to be able to be honest with you about what's happening and what they're worried about or what we're doing wrong or doing right. So all of that is fantastic advice. Thank you, Phani. Thank you to our panelists, to Liz, to Candace, to BJ and Phani for joining us and sharing some of their experiences. We know these are not entirely unique, and we know that all of you are experiencing your own need for resilience, your own need for innovation and successes and wins and fears for, you know, the long haul. So we're going to talk about that in some of our breakout sessions coming up in a few moments, but that'll wrap up our panel for this morning. We really appreciate you attending and giving us your attention. I'll turn things over to Michelle Evans back with the Illinois Prairie Community Foundation to set us up for the rest of the morning.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Oh, what an awesome panel discussion. I think everybody learned something. It's good to see how everybody's, you know, kind of pivoting and making changes throughout everything that's going on. What we'd like to do is take a brief little break while we configure the breakout rooms. So if you need to go get a coffee or visit the little ladies room or boys room, you can do that now. We're gonna send everybody to a breakout room. The topic for the next 20 minutes in the breakout room will be resilience. And each of the panelists, I think, BJ has to leave, but we're going to have a facilitator in each of the rooms. And if we can just sort of talk about resilience, and it can just be other people explaining or sharing what they've, their experiences at their nonprofits, or just, I just am envisioning an inner exchange of information. So we'll come back together a little bit to recap that, and then we'll go do another breakout room on innovation. So give us just a few minutes to get these rooms set up, and there'll be 20 minutes in those breakout rooms. So I guess I'd like to see if any of the breakout rooms have anything that they'd like to share with a larger group. Anything that was really interesting that was discussed in your breakout that you'd like to share with the other rooms. Feel free to unmute yourself and share with everyone else. Somebody?
I can share one thing.
All right.
So right at the end of our breakout room, we were, you know, talking about how this whole crazy COVID time has allowed us to do things that we wouldn't necessarily have been able to do in normal times, like porch drops. So I was sharing, you know, that I have friends, you know, that don't have, you know, significant others, or they don't have family in the area that's close. So I've been trying, you know, to do like porch drops of, you know, little treats and things, or, you know, we do like porch chats sometimes if I happen to catch them, you know, at their house. And if I was doing my normal in-person busy museum crazy schedule where I'm like, you know, late at night at the museum, or Saturdays I'm at the museum, I wouldn't have time to do that. And I wouldn't have time to bake as many millions of loaves of banana bread that I have baked this entire pandemic either. Or, you know, sewing face masks that I've been sewing like crazy this whole time for anybody who needs one. And so it's given you a chance, even though we're all still crazy, super busy, it's a different kind of busy that has some flexibility that allows us to do these things that are both mutually beneficial to the person who's receiving and also to you who are doing them as well.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Anyone else have something to share? I know there was good interchange or exchange of information in all of the rooms. Anyone else?
Oh, Gail Dobbins had her hand up.
Sorry, Gail, I didn't see you.
Our group talked about agility, which I think is good, and about at first in March, getting over the shock and what we all did to try to do something to get out there right away. My contribution was, we have a lot of wonderful photos of shows in progress on our stage, and we did a name that show contest with photos for 2 or 3 months while we were busy getting ready to do the radio plays with WGLT, to do the 10-minute play videos. That stuff took time, and we wanted to fill that initial gap after we got over the shock.
My sharing is about the number. You know, I can have a hang up on doing things in big numbers, but what I have done this time is really just to limit to, because of my own availability also, was I did telephone connection with one of our parishioners in church who has no family and is 91 years old and is blind. And so his only really connection is me at the moment, and also his caregiver. And so that has really been an insight, you know, for me. And to know that I'm making, you know, a little difference maybe, you know, in his life. Thank you.
Thank you. That's very important, is just staying connected with folks.
I think the creativity that everybody has exhibited throughout these months and the way they've had to reinvent themselves, that was a lot that we talked about in our group. The partnerships, the exchanges, and just the willingness to shift and to make those changes to make things happen has really made a difference.
Thank you, Laura.
Mm-hmm.
Any other suggestions or comments?
From me.
Yes, Donna.
Hi, I completely missed the breakout because I had never mind, something else planned that came up and I was just going crazy. But I want to shout out to Candace for doing the cemetery walk. I was involved in that for many years, and it was so nice to watch it again, to actually see it. It was great. I loved it. You actually filmed it in the cemetery, which was wonderful. And also to Gail, who is setting up those wonderful 10-minute plays that are hysterical, most of them, and that's been fun. And also the two radio shows, of which I'm happy to be a little bit of a part of, that those have been a lot of fun, and thank you for that. I appreciate that for anybody that's out there doing stuff. I run, I'm an artistic director for Seedling Theater. I work with handicapped children and adults. We are in the process of doing our own video with about 11 of our actors with some music. Oh, it's going to be short, only about 10 minutes, but it's also hard. We're on Zoom, of course, because with our population, compromised situations are at hand, of course. So everyone's been at home. So we're having a lot of fun doing the Zoom thing that will come out in December. Like I said, just a short thing. So look for Seedling Theater's big production, 10-minute production. So
awesome.
Thanks to everyone doing all their hard work in this crazy, crazy time.
Thanks, Donna. We will keep an eye out for that. I'm very interested in seeing that also. Anybody else? I can't see everybody to see if anybody's got a hand up or not. No.
I could say something.
Yes.
We talked a little bit about asking for money during this time, and how we feel kind of strange about it, or we don't feel good about it, or we're a little hesitant. And so we discussed that, and the consensus was sort of that let people tell you no instead of self-selecting, and that was kind of one, and that there are people out there that really do want to help out right now, and if you don't ask them, they won't help.
Yeah, I think we're finding people are willing to step up in different ways than we have traditionally been expecting them to, and there's no hurt in asking people to do something, and what hurts is, I mean, getting a no is not that bad. Any other suggestions or comments from your breakout session on resilience?
I think one of the things that we talked about in ours when we talk about the agility is understanding that is going to be a situation we're going to have to confront. What we think we knew is not what we know today. And even when we begin to make a pivot, that pivot's going to get pivoted. And so we live in an age of uncertainty, filled with the anxiety that we don't actually know whether our choices are ultimately going to make the difference that we consider them to have to make. And how we all have to be at that level of understanding and reach out to people, I think, in some respects, who maybe know things that we don't know. When we talk about speaking to donors in a way that helps them to connect us to parts of our community that we may be disconnected to, I think is key when we talk about involving donors and engaging donors in new and innovative ways.
And Matt, I would add in engaging other organizations in the community the same way, right? I mean, there might be organizations that just don't naturally have a spot in the resolution for all of this, right? Like they don't know where they can help, or they feel like their mission is just so different than what the top of mind issues are. That's where collaboration can come in. And so it could be donors, but it could also be, I think, other groups. I mean, who are our partners throughout the year normally? Maybe this is a good time for us to be reaching out to them and asking them, you know, what could you do to help with this? I mean, that's actually how the Children's Museum was invited into the youth programming for the United Way panel. It wasn't because we went seeking them, they actually came seeking us, and we really appreciated it because we were focusing on our immediate delivery. And we realized we'd already been doing a lot of work with informal educators across the region for years. And we had answers to questions that group had, and we didn't have to do any work because we already had them at our fingertips. So I think sometimes having, reaching out to those, I won't say fringe, but maybe not the obvious partner, especially those who are not heavily engaged right now, there might be solutions or opportunities awaiting us, and we don't even realize it.
Yeah, Beth, Michelle, do you have time for one more comment? I'm sorry.
Sure.
So just to build on your comment there, Beth, and Ryan was talking about passive people or what have you, maybe a comment that I'll probably add to the discussion is, how do we increase our circles of empathy? If you think that the work that you're doing is in your circle of empathy, you need to figure out how do you get the word out to people who are outside of that circle of empathy. For you to get collaborators, donors, or what have you, we need to broaden our reach. Why would that person care about what you're doing? The best thing that we could do is at least present to them what you're doing and why they should care. So how do we break those cycles of empathy and expand those circles of empathy too, right? To Ryan's point, I think that passiveness at times comes from, I am fine, I'm okay. But you know what? I think you're a part of a bigger picture, and how do we help them see that bigger picture through communication, I think is important. And there are many people who will step up and step in to collaborate. At times we don't really make the reach out, and how do we proactively make that reach out too?
Awesome point. Thank you. All right, so we've pretty much reached the time to break out again. This time we're going to go back to the same groups, and we would invite you to talk about innovation, anything that's been innovative. I know it's probably a little bit of overlap between the two sessions, being resilient and innovative. Sometimes it's the same, involves some of the same parts, but if you wouldn't mind, we will do that for the next 20 minutes, and then we will get back together and share and wrap up this session. And it's been just so informational with everybody. So I'm gonna send everybody to a room again, and I will see you in 20 minutes. Thank you. Does anybody have anything that they would like to share from that?
One really good point that was brought up is, that we've broadened our audiences with so much virtual content to not turn those audiences away, you know, when we try to do more in person or, you know, shift things around, that we want to both keep our traditional audiences, but also those new audiences that we've gained because we've been doing online things.
Sure. It's definitely it's a new audience. It's a new source of, you know, participants or fund holders or funders, donors. One thing I noticed in the chat before we went, and I'm gonna just do a shout out to Nora. Maybe she wants to talk about it a little bit, from Threshold to Hope. She was talking about one of the innovative things that they moved to having outdoor art classes. So Nora, do you want to pop in and share a little bit about that?
Sure. Our classroom just wasn't large enough for us to be able to have classes when they open things up again in the early summer. So starting in June, we started in the park at Miller Park in the shelter by the theater. And it was a lovely place to do art, and our artists really enjoyed it. There were enough tables that we could be far enough apart that people felt comfortable. And we really kind of hated to come back indoors in October, but you have to come back indoors. But at the same time, we were able to come to the Creativity Center, which also gives us a very large space that we can have 1 to 2 people at a table and still have a nice size bunch of people without being on top of each other. And it's really been a good silver lining in this whole thing, that we were able to find new ways to do art, new ways to reach new people. And we also did some, when we were stuck at home, we did some YouTube videos and those kind of things. And I do plan on videotaping some of the classes that I teach here so that we can continue doing some online things. So it does change your viewpoint, how you need to do things.
Sure. Offers new avenues. So thank you for sharing on that one.
And let me also say thank you very much to Illinois Prairie for their wonderful grant, which keeps us in art supplies. We really have appreciated it.
Oh, you're very welcome. Any other comments from the group? Oh, I see in the chat, it says Nora's group has artwork up at Bloomington Public Library. Come on in and see it or check it out once they're back open. So thank you for that note, Michelle, with 2 L's.
Hello?
Yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out to Illinois Prairie Community Foundation for their wonderful grants for us. We are a small theater. We don't need a lot of money. But I also do donations from family and friends, and that has been really successful. Don't forget about your family and friends. And I try not to do it every year to bombard them because everyone's asking for money. But besides the Community Foundation, we have a run every year by a friend of mine's, and that's been wonderful. So just never discount where you can get some money, you know, and don't always remind people, you know, it's coming up. So you just have to be a little bit aggressive, but people really enjoy what we do, and I'm very happy with that. So I get a good amount of money.
Good. Thank you for sharing. Any other comments from Innovation Breakout? If not, we're running up on the end time for this session. I did want to make a couple of announcements to wrap up here. We did record this all day today. We did not record the breakout session. I'd just like to thank everybody who has attended, our 4 panelists, and so much thank you to Beth for moderating this. It's been a great thing. Thank you to my marketing committee who's helped with the technology of this. Without these guys, I wouldn't be able to do what I'm doing here. I want to thank everybody who has been here, and everybody please stay safe and take care of yourself and stay resilient, stay innovative, and we will see you all at another event, hopefully next year. So thank you so much. Bye-bye.